Meanwhile, now to foreign policy, President Trump revealing to Fox News he believes that the war with Iran is close to ending.
Wow. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst joins us now in Tel Aviv. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. President Trump laying out the latest timeline for the war in an interview with Fox News. He says the conflict is close to finish, but the mission not yet complete. A second round of talks between the U.S. and Iran could take place as early as tomorrow, as the president laid out why the operation began.
I had to divert, because if I didn't do that, right now you would have Iran with a nuclear weapon. And if they had a nuclear weapon, you would be calling everybody over there, sir. And you don't want to do that.
Well, you keep saying was. Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished.
The president's comments come as U.S. Central Command continues to block Iranian ports with more than a dozen support vessels. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper explained the impact of this move, saying, quote, a blockade of Iranian ports has been fully implemented as U.S. forces maintain maritime superiority in the Middle East. An estimated 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea. In less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, U.S. forces have completely halted economic trade going into and out of Iran by sea. The Iranians are now responding to the blockade after the IRG threatened to target any U.S. ships in this area. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian taking a slightly different tone.
There is now a problem in the Persian Gulf, and the world has been thrown into turmoil. This has had an impact across the world. People are dissatisfied and have raised their voices. But we ourselves are in the midst of this turmoil, and despite all these pressures, our work is progressing properly.
Amid talk of diplomacy, there are thousands of additional U.S. forces arriving in the Middle East this week. President Trump wants to maintain a variety of options in case these diplomatic efforts fail. Guys?
Hey, Trey, the feeling after the meeting in Pakistan was the people in that meeting with J.D. Vance could not make the final decision. If there's a round two, who's going to be in that meeting that can make the final decision? If I'm J.D. Vance, I don't want to go travel 18 hours again, sit for 21 hours, and find out whatever deal I have can't be finalized.
It's a great question, and we've been talking with U.S. officials. They say the Trump administration is not going to make the same mistakes that previous administrations made when it comes to dealing with the Iranians. They're not going to let the Iranians drag out these talks indefinitely. If the president does send another team back to Islamabad or a different location in the region, it would be to get a deal done or ultimately look at other options. We do understand there are conversations taking place about scheduling the second round of talks. But after the Iranians have had a few days to go back to their capital of Tehran and speak with top officials, the expectation is they would be able to come back to the negotiating table with a serious set of conditions and the consultations that were made in the Iranian capital that would allow them to make a final decision and create some sort of good faith agreement with the United States.
All right, Trey, thanks so much.
So there's an op-ed in the New York Times today, and it says how Trump can wrap up the war. It's by Brett Stevens. And he writes this: first, Trump should put Iran's regime to a fundamental choice. It can have an economy, or the regime can attempt to have a nuclear program while trying to control the Strait of Hormuz. But it can't have both. Second, Trump must bear in mind what precipitated the current crisis with Iran, not its nuclear programs, but the murder of thousands of Iranian protesters in January. What Iran's leaders fear more than economic collapse is the wrath of their own people. The most important step Trump could take would be to warn the regime publicly and in a way that gets communicated to Iran's people. That will intervene militarily if it, again, attempts a bloody crackdown on public protests.
Well, I would just say, the president already gave them the economic choice. I mean, what did he do the first 6 months of his administration going to the Middle East? He's made that pitch all over the world. These are people that fundamentally, and he gets to this at the end of the article, that reject that idea. So you're not dealing with, power brokers here that want economic prosperity over their religion. They choose their religion. The second thing is the president is not ignorant to what's going on in Iran. He understands that these people right here aren't really in charge that he's dealing with. The question is, does he want our troops to get some rest so they can get back to the battlefield. And I think that's pretty much what's happening.
So they're losing $435 million a day. The reversal on the blockade has been a brilliant move. It has stopped all transit. They're not selling any oil. Originally, they said, let's let the Russian oil and the Iranian oil out there just to keep the global price of oil and gas down, or reasonably down. Well, the flip side of that is they get some revenue. So the president said, enough. We're stopping all of it. Nobody in, nobody out. And the risk, of course, is they'll respond by shutting down the Red Sea with using Houthis. They haven't done that yet because they are desperate. Keep in mind, as Bret Stephens writes, and he's a conservative columnist that originally started off anti-Trump, and he said, when Trump started the second term, he goes, I'm starting with a clean sheet. He goes, I'm going to call balls and strikes. And the one thing that he appreciates is the fact that, and he outlines here, when they had no water and inflation was at 40%, they rose up in the streets in January. And you know what happened? And the Pope Leo should understand this. Between 30 and 41,000 people were killed in cold blood. And they charged the families for the bullets that they had to use to kill their loved ones in order to get their bodies back. That didn't reach the Vatican. I don't know why. Number two is now you have inflation at 140%.
180.
180%. And they've lost 2 million jobs since the war started. And they already had high unemployment. So this thing is a tinderbox. What I love that he brought up, and the president thinks this, but he knows using the term regime change is not something that's really works in our favor. We don't want to go do that and flip every ugly government in that direction. But we do know that the people have no way to communicate, and they are going to be massacred if they rise up. So if we pull back and then we watch this supreme leader do what Saddam Hussein did when he left after the Persian Gulf War and just annihilate thousands of people, that's going to be on us. So we have to find a way to help the people.
Yeah, I liked how he broke down, you get to choose. You want an economy or you want your nuclear program? Do you want your stockpile of enriched uranium or do you want the Strait to be reopened? And if Iran targets the Arab ports, there will be consequences. America or Israel can destroy Karg Island.
Yep. We'll be following. The president has options. We'll see what happens.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.